hot money. And then we can test that, so we just need to.
So what are?
Right there. Perfect, good. Gary, would you mute yours or? Good.
We good?
We're good. Let me know. Everybody ready to take them?
Let's see. them.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Town of Bluff Planning and Zoning and Town Council work session, joint work session. Today is Thursday, November 20th, 2025. The time is 6 p.m. We are meeting in person at the Bluff Community Center and virtually as well. Let's go ahead and start with the roll call of Planning and Zoning Commissioners. This is Amanda Podmore, Chair.
Marcia Higginbotham,
Brian Whitney.
William Collins.
Gary Cos.
Welcome, and then from Town Council. Anne Martin.
Linda Sosa,
Brett Morsby. Spencer Wade.
Welcome. Is Jen online?
I don't see her on yet. Is she planning on being on? Not sure. I'll text her. Okay.
oh, right, right, look.
And Erin Nelson serving as town manager.
Aaron, thank you, and thank you, members of the public, and Chris Mackinnon for joining. Okay, our agenda this evening is to go over some draft ordinances that we are trying to finalize by the end of the year that have all gone through public comment. And then also look at our draft general plan. My hope today is that we can get feedback from commissioners, town council on what we heard from the public and what we're reading into, in particular, the renewable energy ordinance and the RV ordinance. And then we'll hear from Aaron as well in the draft general plan. Jen Davila at 6:01. And then we'll close the meeting with a couple other items. Any changes to the agenda? Any comments? I noticed that we do have the town attorney on, who's supposed to go first, if any of these items. You have an update on that?
Say that.
Is there a particular order we should do this?
Probably starting with renewable energy and the sense of this mechanism, been working on those.
Great, okay. My hope is we could spend maybe 15 minutes on each ordinance, 15 minutes on the general plan, and then 15 minutes on the last pieces. So we'll move into item 1, review of the renewable energy ordinance that we will share on the screen. Correct. Is that visible by all on into the internet? Great. Okay. Well, I will open it up first to our town attorney, Chris Mackinnon. Do you have anything you'd like to add about this ordinance at this time?
Well, thanks, Amanda. I haven't really been involved in your discussion so far. Originally, I understood that you were concerned about mainly with solar projects, but I see your ordinance goes a little bit further to address other renewable energy types. Like I think does it address wind projects and in addition to solar? The challenge for an ordinance of this type is to, I think, not try to do too many things. You want to make sure that you've got projects of a certain size, particularly solar, that would be a use by right in appropriate zoning districts. And I'm thinking, primarily roof-mounted or similar size arrays that people would want to use for a residence or a business. That seems to me to be a very logical place to start, is to say that those are used by right in whatever zoning districts that you decide you want to designate. The second is when you get into larger scale business or larger scale commercial or utility scale arrays, those would typically need to be reviewed as a conditional use process. And the commission is probably aware that conditional use is sometimes a kind of a fraught review process in that ideally it's designed to allow for the imposition of conditions that will address site-specific externalities or offsite impacts. So, things like offsite glare, smoke, dust, noise, those are all the kinds of things that people want to address through a conditional use process. And it would probably be appropriate for larger scale projects to have that to be treated as conditional uses. And the question is, what's the triggering point? And it looks like you've got multiple levels of project review. One thing I would suggest is I see a lot of jurisdictions that and I see this, it's by no means unique to your situation, but I see it in other jurisdictions as well, is that they try to they create too many zones. They create too many districts with too many differing rules, and it gets confusing to administer. My suggestion for you is you may want to focus on having one or two levels of review process. One, a use by right, a second, maybe a small scale conditional use, and then a third would be for those largest projects that would be things like a utility scale solar array. And you have a great deal of flexibility about what kinds of concerns you want to have addressed in that process in terms of configuration of the site plan and conditions that you may want to approve. But fundamentally, those are adjudicatory processes, meaning that they typically need to be decided by the town council, ideally with recommendations from Planning Commission. But I think it's important that you have a lot of flexibility for these smaller projects so that a property owner, if they want to come in, they meet setbacks and it's properly designed, that they can get those things approved with a minimum of fuss or review. And so those are my general comments for you. I'm happy to answer if you have specific questions about what you want to do. And really everything I'm talking about here is specific to solar. When you start talking about other things like wind, they have a whole different set of impacts, and it may be you may want to start with solar and then try to move on to wind level, wind review, unless you're concerned about something being at your doorstep, next month or very soon. And I do know there's more, there's a significant amount of wind energy in San Juan County over by Monticello, and it has been subject to some controversy and disputes amongst landowners and the people, local governments there. One other thing that I was going to say was that we see more and more, I guess, geothermal type or heat pump type development. That to me seems to be a lot less in need of land use review. I mean, it's mainly, it's mainly a plumbing thing. And I'm not sure if you need to have a zoning type review for a lot of that stuff. And I'm not sure if that's been built into this draft ordinance or not. But if you can find a way to confit that kind of system on your property, comply with setbacks, not disrupt your neighbors, that seems to me to be a relatively straightforward process as well. But I'm glad you guys are looking at this stuff. And the other thing I wanted to say to you is that my goal has been with a lot of these code revisions or these ordinances is to try to integrate them as much as possible with the rest of your code so that, for example, the definition of a non-conforming use for a solar facility is no different from that for any other non-conforming use that we've defined in our code. With the idea being that eventually these ordinances are all going to be sort of converged together into a unified document as much as we can. We can't always do that, but that's what I've been trying to do. So I'm glad to answer any questions.
Hi, Chris, it's Marcia, and you brought up you made me think of a couple of questions. First of all, site-specific conditional use, does it set a precedent for the next person who comes in and asks for something on a site? And we change the conditional use based on that site, doesn't mean we have to because of the last one.
Well, this is an interesting distinction, or it's an interesting question. In Utah, the way a conditional use works is if conditions can be imposed, which will mitigate to an acceptable degree the offsite impacts of a particular use, then it shall be approved.
Right.
And so, and each application is separate and unique, but there is, and shouldn't be regarded as setting a precedent. But the rule is that if you can devise, conditions that to an acceptable degree mitigate the impacts, then you have to grant the permit. And some jurisdictions have said, no, we're not going to do conditional use permits at all because of the time and the intensity of the review. Some jurisdictions have said, we're just going to say, if you can meet these 4 standards, for example, X, Y, and Z, whatever they are, then it's a use by right for that particular use. So it's not a conditional use; it's more of a use meeting established ordinance criteria. And so that's one approach that you can do there to make it a little more certain. That says if you meet these discrete criteria, you can get your permit.
Okay. And the second thing was that you talked about to be careful to allow it in some places and only have conditional use in some places. Are you thinking that level 0, 1, 2, 3 is too many levels because we end up with too many conditional places? You'd rather see us only need conditional use on the 2 bigger ones, for example?
Yeah, I think it's something you need to be aware of because one of the things I'm worried about for Bluff, and I've expressed this to staff, is that you don't have a professional planner on staff. You don't have people, you struggle with, the review of applications, and your planning commission, you guys are a volunteer board, and I don't want to make your workload unreasonable. And so I think that you definitely want to have a conditional use process for those big projects that are going to have significant community impacts. But smaller ones that there are probably going to be a lot of, your neighbor down the street who wants to put solar panels on his roof or on his garage or the shed out back, whatever it is. I mean, a lot of those things I can and should be processed quickly and maybe even administratively without having to go through planning commission. Because really, unless they're creating offsite impacts, I'm not sure that there's a need for intensive review.
Okay, and the last part was the wind and geothermal addressing those needs. And while I understand we're not as specific in this ordinance, this draft, we already have someone using geothermal in town. We already have someone using wind energy in town. And while I don't, I was party to the windmills in Monticello when I was on county planning and zoning. And I don't anticipate big wind farms down towards Bluff because the wind supposedly at the time did not conform to the need. So what I want to make sure though is that locals can in fact have their own wind generator, if you will, and or geothermal, and it's good to plan for it now. So my question to you is, did you in fact not want us to have it in this bill, in this ordinance? Or
Well, okay, yeah, there are a couple thoughts. First off, the general rule in Utah, in a lot of places, is that if it ain't illegal, it's legal. In other words, you have a full right to use your property unless there is an ordinance on the books that that imposes a restriction. And so people that have wind devices now, those are legal. We haven't enacted any ordinance to restrict them. And if we do enact an ordinance that might render those facilities non-compliant with the new rules, they're still going to be allowed as a non-conforming use. So it's just a question of how concerned are you about it, and what do you want to address? I mean, windmills, a lot. I'm not an expert on what the impacts are that they generate. I understand that they can be noisy. They are a visual impact. But if you feel like it's something that's at your doorstep, it's likely to need some attention very soon, then by all means, you have the discretion to enact, the council has the discretion to enact an ordinance. But you're certainly, the other thing I was going to tell you is that you're certainly under no obligation to do this now. And the other thing that we've done in Bluff in the past is when were confronted with a situation that maybe required an immediate response, we've enacted a moratorium to give breathing room to enact rules. But if you're comfortable with these changes, go ahead. And it's really just a matter of community comfort.
Thank you, Marjorie. Chris, this is Amanda. So the purpose and intention behind this ordinance is recognizing that renewable energy is in alignment with the values of our general plan, strategic plan. So we do want to make it possible in town, but in a way that is safe and protects our natural environment at the same time. And so we were concerned that we were precluding the option for people to have wind or small scale geothermal projects. So if you're saying that if it ain't illegal, it's legal, maybe we can remove it from here, but generally we wanted this to be more encompassing so that we weren't signaling that we were closed to projects of that nature.
Yeah, and so that's fair. I mean, your general plan is supposed to be forward-looking. It's supposed to be an expression of your community values and the direction you want to be going as a community, and kind of aspirational. We can talk about that stuff later, but sometimes you want to sort of say that these uses are favored. We want to encourage them and try to facilitate that as much as possible. But you don't have to have an ordinance on the books to allow something to happen. I mean, people are free to build on their property. And unless we've got an ordinance on the books that's addressed to public safety and zoning, police power concerns, they have a right to do those things as long as it's, safe and compliant with the construction codes and those things.
So just given our time constraints tonight and that we have other things to address with you as well, I'm curious about next steps because we had hoped to put this before Planning and Zoning Commission for a vote to recommend it on December 4th, but we're still awaiting review from you. So do you know of your ability to give this a deeper dive so that we could
what I'll do is I have to confess to everybody who's here tonight that I've been the year end has been crazy for me, and I'm a little tardy in getting on many of these projects, and for that I apologize to everybody. I will do my best to get this in final form so that you guys can adopt it. And you said December 4th?
Yes, we might need a work session before that.
Okay. And you know, the other thing I can tell you is that we can try to do this as a standalone ordinance and maybe not incorporate it into our code just yet, and see how it works and then, you know, work on maybe amending it later. I understand it's a priority, so we'll do our best to get that done, and I want to make a note of that.
Yeah, and as a reminder, we do have a building department.
Right.
Okay.
Good. I'm aware. Yeah. And I hope it's working well.
Okay, so we will work on making sure you have the most up-to-date version of this.
After tonight.
After tonight, yeah, thank you. But folks, okay, we move on to the RV ordinance. Yeah, okay. So same as Leah's pulling that up. Chris, have you had a chance to look over this ordinance?
I have, and you know what I've been doing on that is we've already got our existing kind of the core of our zoning code, which is in we call it chapter 5, I think, of our, it's actually chapter 6. What I've done is I've been trying to incorporate all of your RV provisions, the stuff dealing with mobile homes, modular homes, tiny houses, and recreational vehicles. I think that's all of them. And making sure that that's integrated into the rest of your code. I think, you know, the way the law is these days, all of those things, well, not all of them, recreational vehicles and are kind of their own separate category, but tiny houses, mobile homes, and modulars, the general rule is every single one of those is an allowable use in any zoning district where a dwelling is permitted or an ADU is permitted. And that's where I see you guys wanting to go with your changes. And then RVs can be allowable in zoning districts under specific conditions. And what I see you guys wanting to do is try to limit them as, you know, maybe when someone is a short-term guest, or where someone is storing one and not occupying it as a dwelling. But then you also want to establish rules for RV parks. And I think all that stuff makes sense. What I want to try to do is integrate that with the rest of your land use code. So for example, we have site plan review process built into our land use code. A new RV park that comes in that's proposed should go through a site plan process. And the question is, what kind of conditions do you want to impose on that site plan process so that you can make those facilities work for your town and that make them attractive and, you know, nice elements for the community. Same is true if somebody wanted to do a tiny house development or some, you know, anything else like that. So I think what you've got is a good start, and I've been working on that. I see that you've also added, you're doing more. You're adding density standards, and you're also adding some, you know, different rules for short-term versus long-term. And again, so you're adding, you're doing more with this document. But I think all of that stuff is those those are good concerns, and I think that, you know, we can make that work. The one thing there was one thing that I was a little concerned about was that your ordinance sort of recognized non-conforming RV parks, and I assume you must have a couple in town where people have more than one unit. The general rule is, again, that if you have a non-conforming use, that use can continue indefinitely. It can be transferred to a successor in title. It doesn't have to go away or be changed. But it can't be expanded. And so I did have some concerns. There were some changes that I want to make sure that the non-conforming use rules that we have for things like RV parks in this ordinance are the same as the non-conforming use rules that we have for non-conforming uses generally in our town. And so I want to make that consistent. But other than that, I think you guys have a lot of good provisions in there. I don't know. Are there questions that I can address or concerns that you guys have?
Questions from commissioners or town council?
I have a question on the residential RVs versus mobile homes. Why do we only allow one RV or tiny home per acre for residential, but mobile homes we allow one per half acre?
I think that that's based on the density standards in the zoning code. We can't. No, right. Dot. Keep it low.
Residential zoning is a half acre, commercial's 3/4. So if you are going to allow, okay, so that's a good question of where we allow one versus more.
Yeah, I just don't understand what the difference is
Yeah.
between an RV and a tiny home. As
Yeah.
doing it one
Well-
per one, and then the next one is one per half acre. Okay.
You know, one suggestion that I have on that is that and this is a policy judgment, but I'm of the opinion that the functional difference between a mobile home or a modular home and a stick-built home they're the same. And so I think the density standards for and you know and setbacks and all of that stuff for mobile modular should be the same as a stick-built home. If it's one dwelling per acre or one dwelling per half acre, whatever your dimensional standards are. Now, ADUs are different, but you know, I think that you want to have allow a mobile home or a modular or a tiny house as an ADU where, you know, subject to the same kinds of rules. I don't want you to be in a situation where you're kind of penalizing somebody for the type of housing they decide to construct. And you certainly want to be inclusive. There's an affordability element here that you want to try to encourage people to build housing as best they can that will provide housing for the community and the workforce. So I know that's kind of a lot to digest, but I hope you guys will lean that way.
And I think that's how we lean generally, so we appreciate any recommendations for improving towards that value.
And to me, Jennifer, your question fits in with would someone please read this because we, you know, we don't necessarily know that we made a mistake.
Yeah, well, thinking about it, so with the mobile home. We said 2 because that is what it is for if it were a stick-built home. That's in a residential, I believe you can have 2 dwellings, whereas residential for the RV, once you have 2 RVs, it's an RV park. And this was the attempt to not create RV parks in a residential area.
Okay.
How do tiny homes fit in with that?
And is it different if they're on wheels or?
RV and tiny house on wheels, but based on what Chris just said, a tiny house on wheels is actually more like a mobile home than it is an RV.
But I'm not sure if I said that.
Right? Oh,
I
maybe
tend to
not.
view I tend to view a tiny house on wheels as much more like an RV because they
Oh.
tend to be short term. They get moved around and it makes sense. People are using tiny houses as like a temporary dwelling while they're trying to build their forever home. So you've got a rule to facilitate that. But it seems like tiny houses and RVs should probably be allowed in the same in an RV park, and it seems like tiny houses should also be allowed in a mobile home park too. I think where it gets tricky is allowing RVs in a mobile home park because they seem to be a little bit different. One's shorter term use and one's more like a regular home. And I don't know if you guys have struggled with those issues.
We talked about it with our mobile home park and we determined if we had a separate space for the mobile home park and a separate space for the RVs within that mobile home park, it could be a nice way to encourage someone to build a mobile home park that would still have that revenue stream of an RV park.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and Chris, like a big kind of overview as you're looking through this, our intentions really were to add clarity to where affordable houses can be built and how, and like to encourage affordable houses and density. And their second big priority was to address this problem of de facto RV parks popping up that may not be in compliance with, or may not be healthy in terms of like septic systems and stuff. So those are the two big issues as you're looking at it that we wanted to address. So if we've missed the mark on those, please help us.
Yeah, and can you tell me I don't know this off the top of my head. What zoning districts do you want to allow mobile home and RV parks? I don't know if I have that resolved in my head.
And our chart did a terrible job. We want them to be allowed in agricultural 2 and 3 zones and commercial zones.
Okay. A2, A3, and commercial.
Yeah, and mobile home parks in residential zones, but not RV parks in residential zones.
Oh, okay. Mobile home parks in resident. Okay. So they could be in all residential zones for a mobile home.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll try to make some sense of that matrix that you guys put together. I mean, I was a little confused by it, and I just need to kind of spend some time to get my head wrapped around it and make sure that it's going to work for you.
So yes, kind of same timing as before. We would love to address this at our regular meeting on December 4th and potentially vote to recommend it to town council for approval. If you can get us a draft before then that we can review in a work session, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll have to plan a special session later in the month.
And I'll try to stay as close as I can to what you guys have given me. There are a few places where I've tried to streamline definitions, tried to make it work easier. If I see an opportunity for that, I'll do that. Again, because I'm always thinking about who's going to be enforcing this and how are we going to make sure that this gets administered efficiently for someone who comes in with an application.
Great, thank you for that. Any final questions for Chris or comments at large for Simmons?
I know that I've made a lot of edits on this RV as well as renewable. I'll try to clean these up tomorrow. If any other commissioner wants to meet up with me tomorrow, we can kind of clean these up so that we can send you our final version that you can review.
That would be great. I'm working from the version of the RV ordinance. I think does it have a date? I'm not sure which. I thought it was the most recent iteration. I hope it is, but But yes, if there have been additional changes, please get them to me and I'll get it turned around as quick as I can.
Okay. Will do. Anybody available to work with Maria tomorrow?
After 4 p.m. I can.
I'm sorry, can't.
Before. Afternoon.
After work, sounds great. Great. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item 3, the general plan latest edits. Erin, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
And Chris, I don't know if you want to stick on for this one. I think the first 2 items on the agenda were ones that we really wanted
Okay.
your presence.
Yeah,
So,
certainly. I don't want to run up the bill. The one thing I'd say about your general plan, you definitely should be thinking about the disconnection that we're working on and what you're going to do with the Bluff bench and long term, and how you're going to be planning for state lands. I think, Sitla lands, I think we ought to have some thoughts about what you want to encourage there. And I'm glad to talk with you guys further if the need arises. But I'll sign off here unless there are questions.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Good night, everybody. Have a nice Thanksgiving.
You
You
too.
too.
alrighty, so I'll go ahead and share, I think maybe my screen. So I did move the general plan, this version 5 into the OneDrive, which you all can see. But unfortunately, when you move it from Word into there, it does some weird stuff with formatting. The formatting still isn't great. But I'm gonna start like really 30,000 foot. So you can see some of my changes from a very high level, and then we can start digging into some of the other stuff. So notably, we did want to streamline this to have it be a little bit more general since we have such a detailed long-term strategic plan. So all of the highlights that you're seeing in yellow are areas where I am recommending that we strike like recommended actions. And so because either it's duplicative of what's in the strategic plan or duplicative of actually what was like mentioned before and or after it. Did try to add more photographs, and then everything past this page would move into the appendices. So it cuts almost 10 pages of text and moves it into appendices. This would be much of the historical data still relevant to the long-term, people should know what happened, how we got here. But you'll find a lot of the history, even of like the transportation section that I had added in over the last couple months. I like moved it out. I was like, we don't need this. We need it, we don't need it. And so that a lot of the hydrology, geology, stuff like that, very, very important information, but it probably doesn't need to, it gets just a little heady. So got about 10 pages of text. The one piece that I don't have in here, because originally we had it as an appendix, would be that future use map. I do think that that's probably an important one to move into the body of this text. So clearly that would need to go into the land use section. But I do think that we could do some stuff in there. So again, all of the highlights in yellow, that's what I'm recommending that we strike. So if you feel real strongly about any of those, please let me know. I think ADA compliant stuff, there's definitely still some work that needs to happen there. Clearly we need to do alt text for photographs, probably change up some of the vision stuff, but this is just like trying to move it in the right direction. So I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. I think probably I'll start here. So everything that we had seen with the introduction remains the same. Moving on to the community profile, I felt like we could pull the demographics out into a table a little bit more. I think there's some other information that we can add, but just to get us started, I don't think I took too much out of the community profile, maybe just like condensed stuff made it a little less fluffy. Community goals all remain the same and they're a little bit more spread out, so they're more easily digestible. I did notice that there is some data that needs to be updated specifically after the disconnection, all of that moves through, so specifically related regarding the percentage breakdown of private versus public lands, which is something I can calculate now that all of that is moving. And then for the zoning, since so much of it is what Amanda and Planning and Zoning had worked on, didn't really do too many changes there. You will notice every time it talks about an appendix, it should have a big blank next to it, because I don't know where it's gonna be at in the appendix. So yeah, so when it comes to these planning, when it comes to the things that are in yellow, these were so specific that it was no longer general, or more than likely, it was so specific, it was already in our strategic plan, and so it really doesn't need to be in the general. So, and then you'll see that I changed the wording. I think this was resulting policies. It is now Bluff priorities, because we are not, the general plan is not an ordinance, it is not law, it is kind of our list of priorities. So that is the wording change that I've implemented throughout. Is we have current conditions, planning assumptions, which the consulting crew really liked. So yes, talk about your assumptions, and then we've got Bluff priorities.
Can I ask about the noise?
Of course.
Seems to me like noise is still a important value that we protect, so I'm curious why the.
It is, and it's more in like the community goals and everything, and so we didn't want to say we're creating specific ordinances, because if we're gonna create the ordinances, it is already, that one is specifically already in our strategic plan. And we don't want to say the priority is to create a very specific ordinance, we should just go and create the ordinance because it's already laid out. But you'll find that like noise, preservation of open space, all of that is really highlighted throughout. But if there is, and so you'll find most of it says, like any of the create the ordinances isn't necessarily there. Sometimes it's been moved up, that like it's a planning assumption that we will have that type of ordinance, or that we have that type of ordinance and would support it. If that kind of makes sense.
Yes.
Well, for clarification then, are you saying that you can take this stuff out of general plan? Because we have this lovely strategic plan, then is there a line in here way at the beginning that says, please refer to strategic plan for specifics?
About 18 times.
Okay. Okay.
So
That's-
usually, yeah, so usually what I've tried to make it say is that, let's see here. So it says, this strategic plan has identified this area. Implement the approved strategic plan initiative or objectives and actions found in section blah, 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 blah. Capital improvement should align with the strategic plan initiatives. And so it does go back on those quite a lot.
Awesome.
So, and then, sorry, it's highlighted in yellow because I was searching for the term,
Yes,
not
yes,
for the
no,
one. So I was like, wait,
yeah.
so that's kind of where we're at. So if there's anything in yellow that you are very, very concerned about, none of this is set in stone. Some of it I did, keep like one specific sentence, but got rid of kind of like the extra stuff. And then for big section, restrictive geography, because it was broken into so many subsections, I just kind of pulled it all back up. So a lot of the duplicative stuff just says, look at soils, hydrology, and geography for that, as opposed to each one having a separate, so that reduced the.
Great photo.
Yeah. I feel like it could use more photos too, if you've got areas that you think it would benefit from and have nice little descriptions and a feel of the town. I think that overall, once I have the A-OK to remove a lot of the yellow, then I can really go in and do a lot of the formatting, and so it'll even be shorter than what it is now, which is great.
You need any like formatting support or like?
Not after I kind of get the approval about the stuff in yellow. I think I'm okay, and or, just send me photos, so.
Do you have a deadline for us for stuff in yellow?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose. So I think. We would like to have planning and zoning give it one last once over, because ultimately is planning and zoning's. Baby, then it moves off to town council for the final. So if you all could get the. Contextual elements approved by your December 4th meeting, then I can get all of the formatting and everything set and pretty and over to town council for their meeting in the last week or the third week of
So
November.
the yellow stuff you want this week so that it can be ready for our 4th meeting.
If you could determine in the December 4th meeting what needs to be versus doesn't need to be, then I can strike it all from there.
So let's do it and talk about it eventually. Is this in our OneDrive?
It's in the general plan folder and planning and zoning.
Thanks.
I like the way that you described it in our town council meeting, in our last, I think it was our last town council meeting, maybe it was our work session. But when we were regarding talking about the general plan, we wanted this to be an easier document for people to digest. If you get handed a 58-page document, it kind of seems overwhelming
Agreed.
a bit. So if it was, if we could cut it down so people could use it as I think the way that you stated it was, oh, I'm thinking about moving to Bluff. Here's their general plan. Does this work for me? And then I can go explore deeper as needed. But I like the way you had worded that, or whatever meeting it was.
And I do still feel very strongly, I mean, one of the things that you should be checking for is that it does represent, the values and goals of Bluff. I felt very strongly as I was going through it, I really got this sense of like, we're protecting open spaces, we're valuing the environment, we're valuing the natural aspects of the community. And so in the specific instances where it's like, oh, we don't necessarily need reference to this noise ordinance again, I did feel comfortable recommending to strike it. However, I do think that, we do want to, define that balance of, yes, it is very clear that these are our values of the community. And, if we feel that, a Bluff priority should be in writing and enforcing a particular ordinance, I can absolutely put that in. I don't.
Does it say the word noise somewhere in here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
So one of the things that we talked about was whether or not we'd have to hold another public hearing because of the changes. And when I went through it today, substantively, I don't see anything. It's really a reformatting of a lot of the information. But there's no section that's been added that moves us from, we're going to be this community to we're going to become a Disney World, where we have to have. I think we're fine. But if anybody feels uncomfortable and you want Aaron or me to get a legal opinion from Chris, we can do that, but.
Sounds like you took more out than added, added new ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it read much more smoothly than our first generation. So thanks to the group that's been working on it.
Yeah.
Some work.
So I will make a recommendation as to like where that future plan, it probably naturally fits in there somewhere. I will add that graphic in. Amanda, just to answer Chris's question about like state lands and SITLA and everything. Do we get detailed enough? Is that an area that you want to talk about during your upcoming meeting? What are your thoughts on that? I know you were not to put you on the spot. I know you were a little closer to that one, so. Down to public.
We have to. I'm kind of wondering if we need a work session, not just the regular meeting on December 4th. Maybe we'll kind of suss out how people feel on their first read, if everybody's in agreement with where it stands, or if we need to have a more substantive discussion.
Sounds to me like if we all just look at this and agree with her yellow slices, won't need a work session,
Yeah.
but if we all go, what the heck is she doing?
What's she done?
it's a chopping block over here. Yeah, and I mean, I definitely understand where Chris is coming from. I do feel as though that, you know, the general gist of public lands is, you know, we want to be at the table, we want to be involved, but ultimately, you know, we don't have jurisdiction over what they do and don't decide to do. We can offer influence, but so I don't know if there's anything.
Attempt to offer.
Yeah. Good point.
The one comment I would make on that is I made a note is it was very clear in the last 2.5 years that Sitla does not deem itself a public land. So I think you need to break out Sitla and public lands. subject
That's
to
a
be
good
allowed.
point. They tell you that, they say
Thanks.
we're not public.
Right.
Yeah.
Could it, well. I think there's a different heading, like a different classification for it that would.
Probably not one that you can print.
You say something like,
State and public land?
well, I don't even know that I would use state and public because we have state lands that I think qualify as public lands. Kind of like gooseneck, stuff like that is a state park.
Uh-huh.
But they refer to themselves now as the trust lands.
Yeah.
Right,
These
so
trust lands,
Say trust
but I do
lands
think you have to break it out.
or school, do they say the word school trust in school
Um,
lands?
So the way it's been explained is they are still Sitla, but the Trust Lands Administration is their rebranding.
Understood,
I'm glad someone does.
understood from them, I don't know why. Okay. Because the money still goes to the schools.
Right.
And could it be externally managed lands or something?
Or lands that don't fall within any of our zones.
No,
Well, no, but they
there
are
is no zone,
Yeah.
it's jurisdiction.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because the idea was to be able to say, look, we've zoned the agricultural,
Oh,
so
right.
we would prefer you to do this.
And then what do you do with wildlands? Which I did find the acreage, by the way.
Excellent.
Where do we go?
The conservancy.
We have, was listed as 320. The Wildlands Conservancy has secured 320 acres of property.
Oh,
And that is under preservation of national lands.
So on page 36, because I don't have my computer here. In the next to the last paragraph on that, there was 320 acres, but Wildlands Conservancy acquired Jennifer Stoll's land, another 95 acres. So I confirmed with Wildlands today, it's 415 acres
okay,
in the wash.
but is that public lands?
No,
No,
that's why I'm saying
different-
what- how do you differentiate
There you go,
myself?
privately owned, open to the public land.
I would agree, there's a little bit of work that probably needs to be done on the bench piece. And
Back in consideration to the Sitla lands. It seems like it might be, we were talking about in our mediation how Bluff is more amenable to certain things that Sitla could try to put up than other communities in our area. I.e. alternative energy sources, stuff like that. We know that they are vehemently opposed to those type of projects in Monticello, in Blanding and some of these other areas. So things like if we could work in somehow in our general plan that we were more open to this type of development, that maybe people who were looking at Sitla land purchase or something would say, oh, this community is going to be more receptive to this than that community would be. So that's one way that I think we could maybe address Sitla in our general plan.
That could be great, Jennifer, because then you're saying that. And somehow acknowledging, for example, the writing of ordinances and such that allow for it. So saying Bluff is.
Well, there again, they don't necessarily have to comply with our ordinances because they can do whatever they want.
Right.
But if they're looking for a community who is, I mean, if it's a solar plant and they're looking for someplace on Sitla land in San Juan County, maybe we would be a more attractive location to them than, say, another community. And if we express this in our general plan, then it says, look, you're not going to walk into a town that's hostile towards the stuff that you're trying to put in.
And it will become imperative to understand the difference between them leasing Sitla land versus buying off a Sitla parcel. If they buy it, they become the entity we're dealing with and they have to conform. If they did, once they've sold it,
Well,
the new entity would, I'm not
No,
talking about I'm not talking about the disconnected.
oh, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh,
the disconnect.
sorry, no,
No,
disconnect,
yeah,
we have
if it's-
nothing.
Yeah, if it's still in town, then yes, they have to conform to
Right.
what our ordinance say. But if it's in the disconnected land, then,
No, disconnected, we're done.
yeah.
They're not part of the discussion.
But they can, that disconnected land still could be affected by our general plan and saying that our community is more favorable to X industry as opposed to Y industry. Solar was my point with that, because we know that Monticello is vehemently against solar. So, you know, I mean, if we had somebody who wanted to do solar, maybe I would rather see a solar something go up there on top than a uranium, no. You should know. I mean,
Now, okay.
just to be blunt.
So obviously this is where we're stuck. We gotta write something for that one.
We do, yeah. I think let's wrap this up for
Yeah,
tonight, if that's
yeah.
okay with folks. But thank you so much, Erin, for all of your work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
it's been-
great.
It takes a village to plan a village.
Good job. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Let's move into new business, item 4, possible dates for the planning and zoning 2026 meeting schedule. Just anticipating that we're gonna have to post these in December, so, and it might be helpful for town council to hear if we have any suggested changes, and of course, we wanna run these by the two incoming commissioners, Caitlin and Ann. Any thoughts from commissioners, what dates you would like to recommend? Amanda, Gary, do you guys have preferences?
What do you guys,
Just kidding.
I think the current format is fine,
Thursdays are fine, I think it doesn't.
yeah. Same time if that works, as long as the town council's all fine, changing it around.
I'd be tired and come on, tell them to come. So,
There's. That's good, it's almost the weekend.
Unless there's any objections,
Yeah.
town council sounds like we'll run. So the idea of keeping it the same by the new income commissioners.
have you guys talked about your days at all? So you don't know yet what, okay.
We call Thursdays at 6.
Yeah, we get there.
And I think the work session versus joint, or work session versus regular meeting breakout is really.
Yeah,
It seems to have worked this year. Huh?
All right, then let's move on to item 5, grant extension and reallocation request for the GOEO's grant for the property foreclosure. Yeah, I'll keep this short because it'll be on next week's agenda as well. For approval, but it is not a reallocation at this time because we still haven't received construction documents from our architects. So it is truly just an extension. I started working on it today. And I'm asking for an extension for 6 months. And since planning and zoning is the approving body for this grant, I will need our approval for this.
And this is the grant that we've had all along, but we haven't been able to use it because we got stuck. And now you will use it for
Something.
the pre-sub.
So yeah, we've used $176,000 of it is allocated to our architecture and engineering firm.
Right?
And so we have about $269,000 left and it terms in about a month from now. And I definitely don't think we can spend that money by then. So I'm asking for an extension so that once we get those construction documents, I can then say, these are our next steps. This is what I'd like to spend that money on. So I anticipate that we should be able to spend it in the next 6 months. If they give us this extension, which I think they should.
well,
They said to lean into the government shutdown if we can. So if anyone has any good ideas of how I can lean into the government shutdown for this grant, let me know.
Well, I would have worked on it sooner, but the
I
government.
would have done it sooner, but as a local government worker, I was working.
expect us to work.
Well,
We are able to mail.
Yeah,
Post office.
Do you have any meetings delayed or emails delayed?
So it's all kind of sitting on our architects,
Yeah, we're just waiting on our architects.
which is a little bit.
our architects would work.
So did the architects have any problems on their end that slowed them up because they were losing clients or couldn't do client work. Is there anything on their end?
I'll ask.
There you go.
But otherwise, tell them to move it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would like, we
It would be nice to
take
have
them at
that.
this
Tell them
point,
we
it'd be
have
good to have it.
Their issue
That's plan
was,
there.
their lady quit.
Yeah.
Um,
Our lead
There you go,
architect,
that's.
yeah, our lead architect.
I ran into that too.
An issue of someone not at work.
Yeah,
Hard on that lady.
She reloaded.
Okay, and so will you need us to sign the, or like,
Yeah, we're voting next.
what do we need, what do we need from us right now?
Nothing right now. Let's put it on our next,
December 4th.
yeah, on our next meeting so that you can vote that you approve the extension request. Okay, and then probably have a reallocation request probably the month later, so it'll be good.
Okay,
can I ask a clarifying question for the previous agenda item? So first and third Thursday, but the first Thursday of January falls on, the first Thursday of January fall on January 1st. Are you gonna push that back? Sorry, no, I'm sorry. Well,
I'm.
Who's chair?
Don't meet on the 1st of January.
Right.
Yeah, that would be great.
Figured that
I
would
won't
probably
be
be first.
here.
Yeah.
So what would that look like? Would we just not meet?
You know, we could probably do 14 days, the 18th then becomes our regular meeting perhaps, let's do it that way.
The 15th,
No,
yeah,
no. Oh, 14 days, duh, 15,
so you could do the 15th and the 29th, and then.
no, or I'm just wondering if we need if we would need a work session then. Well,
Start with the 15th, and then if we need to add something, we have 2 weeks before that first meeting in February.
okay, I don't know, Amanda's thinking. You know, she's,
but we first need to run it by Caitlin and Nan, so.
Right.
Yeah, but, okay,
Great.
we can decide that at our next. Okay, item 6, items for next agenda, this is the planning and zoning, we'll have the ordinances, general plan, extension requests, and meeting schedule, so it's essentially the same. agenda.
just
First.
change the date.
Well, first, anything else? Nothing, so.
That's enough.
Item 7, any other? Marcia?
I just have a quick update, and that is I sent 3 questions to Kristen Bushnell concerning the site plan question we had for her, but I have no answers back from her. So I had written a couple of notes of what I'd like to see us do with that. I'll do it at the meeting or something when we're talking about it. But she is aware that we're asking questions. She hasn't answered. Except to say she's too busy to answer, so.
I have one other. The recorder for the town council did not start up on time, it malfunctioned and shut off. I got the recorder back up online. Oh, about 12 minutes after 6, so I just would like the record to reflect that it's a complete attendance by planning and zoning and the Bluff Town Council. And if you're listening to this and you want to hear the first 12 minutes, you can listen to the one that is uploaded on the Utah Public Notice website by whoever has complete copy.
Or on YouTube,
Or YouTube.
and Zoom has been recording the entire meeting, so we're.
Perfect.
Any others? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Meeting is adjourned at 7:03 PM. Thank you so much, town council, for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
I love these meetings.